Welcome to Get to the Points. We've got Mad Lions today and Lions outside of the stadium. We are here at a very empty Twickenham, trapped inside our bubble inside the stadium for the next month. This is the sacrifice that we make for you, the fans. We're here for our pre-show to talk over some of our matches from our midsummer group today. Joining me are Thorin and Potter. Welcome.
Well, actually, funnily enough, if people don't know, maybe they don't follow British sport, like famously the England team in sport is always called the Three Lions because of the crest of the English football team. I'm wondering if we'll only see three Lions in this particular game because obviously two new people coming in, used to be on one of the worst teams in Flashpoint. Now I'm one of the worst teams in Flashpoint.
Exactly. Well, you know, the Mad Lions are our defending champions. But before we get into their history, we are going to take a look at our format first and foremost. And that format, well, we're in GSL groups right now. This is our second group, or technically it says Group A right there. They're called Midsummer, and we are going to be playing through that. It will be Dignitas versus Mad Lions today first, followed by Fnatic versus Contact. And winners will advance that winners match. Losers will play later this week. One of them will be on the brink of elimination depending on their performance. They may not make it into that last chance qualifier. Our playoffs will be 8 teams, all double elimination coming up starting on November 30th, where we're going for a week straight through all of those matches to crown the Flashpoint 2 champion and get that $500,000 first place prize winner. So, with that in mind, we did have our group yesterday with some interesting results overall, especially Envy coming out strong, but then falling to 4s eventually, and Big taking 2 maps very convincingly, followed by, you know, a little bit of a closer one there on Vertigo versus the new MIBR roster. Now, that will result in Big and 4s being in our winners match. MIBR and Envy later this week. One of them will be ending their Flashpoint 2 run in 4th place, hoping that they are the best 4th place team, which will get them at least the chance to play into the playoffs. Thorin, you weren't on the second matches yesterday, so what was your takeaway from the Big MIBR series?
I think this is an example of where people want to believe that because MIBR won that game, like, oh, they could do it. Look at what they did on Vertigo. That's one of the worst maps for Big, and it was still close. Big still was in it.
They almost came back.
Then on the other 2 maps, where MIBR didn't have an obvious map advantage, they got absolutely plowed. Like, that train has derailed. Like, it was only a hype train for one event, so I personally think they're a team that they're more like trying to get in that 3rd spot, trying to sneak into the playoffs. I don't really know in this group, realistically, if you can expect them, now that there's some film, now that they have themselves haven't got kind of the beginner's luck element anymore, I think it's a bit unrealistic to expect them to go up against a team like Big and win.
Yep.
That's true, but also the other 2 teams were Envy and 4s, which were very underwhelming. So are we saying MIBR is not competing for second? Because in my mind, they still might be.
I have to agree with that as well. I mean, sure, MIBR, I have to agree with you, Thorin. It's the beginner's luck, right? How far will that carry them? I think it's going to carry them quite far because if we look at Envy and 4s, that series was absolutely sloppy as well. So in this group, I would say MIBR, they're still looking hot to trot. It's all coming down to how they perform individually. You know, KNG, he's quiet, he's loud, then he's quiet again, a little bit streaky, a little bit more consistency coming out from some individual performances, and MIBR, they're going to be upsetting.
And it would be absolutely massive, not only one upset at this point, but 2 to really take Big down a peg in this group. So they are kind of the uncontested number 1. Number 2, who's it going to be?
From the way it's gone so far, I think it is between Envy and 4s, in my opinion. Like, the actual player strength on Envy looks like it could be good enough to get over the line. 4s have their style, and no matter how many times you point out their flaws, they play to that style. So I actually feel like the experience angle, the fact that they've been a team for so long, I kind of actually favour 4s to make the underdog run.
If Envy can replicate that Dust 2, the first map in their series, the confidence that they were showing, Calix, I mean, he had no fear. He was picking off 4s players left and right, getting multi-kills. If Envy can look like that on 3 more maps, 2 more maps even, then sure, Envy, they're looking good.
That's fair. All right, let's take a look at today's bracket for our midsummer group. And that will be Fnatic versus Contact, Dignitas Vi versus Mad Lions coming in. And we will be starting with that match on the lower side of the bracket between Mad Lions and Dignitas Vi. We call this group Midsummer because it is a bunch of Scandinavians slaughtering each other. And, you know, as the movie starts, it's a little bit potentially of euthanasia to start things. That's kind of the premise of that film. So Dignitas Vi, some of these legendary older players, are they going to be the first to fall just like in the movie?
I mean, Dignitas themselves already let a couple of the old ones go, you know, just put him to sleep, nice and kind. It's all right. Better times. Remember the old days. Remember 87-0. Sleep. No, the main issue for me is I want to see what these young guys are going to do in Dig. That's the game changer. Because if anyone was watching some of the other tournaments that never end in Counter-Strike, spoiler, actually Mad Lions beat Fnatic yesterday. Like, that's an interesting result. Already people were wondering what's their newer duo going to do. So I think it's the two new players for each team that are going to be the main focal point for me overall.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Dignitas are going to look so different in Flashpoint 2 than they did in Flashpoint 1. Even if we think back to Flashpoint 1, there was some impressive creativity coming out of Dignitas. They had to do that, right? If you can't shoot, you're 5 to 10% just a little bit less skilled than the opponent, or you're just not shooting quite as well, you have to resort to those foundations and fundamentals. Their nade utility, their creativity, especially on the pistol rounds. I mean, Vendetta was calling 4 team members with full utility executing on pistols, and it worked, right? So these are the kinds of creative plays I like from Dig, and now with Heath and Hera in the mix, they're going to be able to kind of have a bit of a flair. These two young guns are going to take duels that exist and get right we're just not comfortable taking. So I think Dignitas, they're off to a exciting, promising future, I think.
Well, let's go back to Mad Lions because they are our defending champions. You are now watching clips of Flashpoint 1 back when Asilian and Bubsky were on the rosters. But we've seen a lot of changes since then. Now, Asilian was brought in to replace Hundred. They have since replaced the IGL yet again, this time with Hooksy. They lost Bubsky to the bench of Astralis. Guess he likes just riding the pine instead of playing for another 500K here and defending his title. Interesting choice there, Bubsky. You're welcome back at any time. We like you. But yeah, had a phenomenal performance for Mad Lions, especially over the course of the playoffs. I think really made it known that he was the MVP of Flashpoint 1. But as Thorin mentioned, Mad Lions with this new roster, well, we brought in Refresh as well. Refresh against Fnatic yesterday had a phenomenal series that Mad Lions won. So I think we need to talk about if Fnatic's coming in as one of the favorites of this tournament, we see these Mad Lions victories, what does that mean? What is the outlook with these roster changes so far for you guys?
Well, I will throw out there, I actually heard from kind of my behind-the-scenes sources. They said, I know you're going to look at Hooksy, because we've seen Refresh play before, and you're going to think, why have they brought in a lower-level IGL? What is that the only person they could get? But I was told, like a lot of the Danish IGLs, he's a guy who has his own system, he has his own way of playing, and so for me, it's going to be what is the overlap between him and Peacemaker? Because we've seen this a lot. This is what Flashpoint 1 was. When the IGL comes in, I suspect they see a little bit of ground of Peacemaker, the coach, they find a nice overlap, and they play within that. But the problem is, like in all teams, when things start to go wrong, when you start to lose games, that's where the guy who really thinks he knows better, could be Peacemaker, could be Hooksy, that's where they come along and say, I want to have more control. And that's where the game of tug and war starts. And so I want to see, can Hooksy implement his style? Because if they're off the ground running with this brand new lineup, it sounds like, yeah, he's having good input. It's not just fragging.
Yeah, that's what Refresh said to us on the Q&A as well, that he's used to that system. And also, interestingly, Refresh said that he's taken over Bubsky's more lurker-oriented role and that he feels much more comfortable in that position. So we really need to see if that is going to activate Refresh, because it seemed to yesterday in their IEM game versus Fnatic.
Yeah, and I was actually pleasantly surprised to see Refresh have such huge numbers in that series. Refresh was a player that has actually been pretty quiet. He's had a lot of promise, but especially versus the heavy hitters, the top 20 teams in the world, he tends to kind of shy away from specific duels that you usually see him just knocking it out of the park versus lower level teams. So I think it's great to see that Refresh is getting a little bit more comfortable in that role. We know how much impact Bubsky had on this Lions roster. He wasn't just the lurk. I mean, this guy was everywhere across the map, buying space, buying time, buying impact for the Lions guys. So Refresh, he's got a lot of responsibility on his shoulders.
I also wanted to point out that yesterday, too, might be an aberration, obviously very small sample size with this new roster, but one of the reasons why they made the change last Flashpoint from Hunden to Asilian is they wanted more fragging power out of the IGL. Hooksy was top fragging in one of the maps yesterday as the IGL of this team, so potentially maybe another upside or part of that decision in order to bring Hooksy in. Very interesting stuff for sure. Let's move over and talk about Dignitas some more as well, because... Dignitas Vi, yes, thank you.
I'm just a stickler. It's one of my things I like to do.
And this roster in Flashpoint 1, now, no more Get Right, no more Exist. They said a lot, hey, we were a LAN team. We were supposed to have this advantage in terms of our many, many events, years and years of LAN experience. That's where we're going to shine. Obviously, LAN has been off the table so far here for the majority of 2020, and they've made these changes. Also, they didn't have Halzerk last time, and Halzerk was their opping ace on this team. They had Guardians standing in for them instead in Flashpoint 1. So now we get to see this new roster. They brought on two up-and-coming players in C.R.A.E and Heath. Is this going to be a better run for Dignitas Vi this time around?
It should be. It should be, right, Monty? But when you say now we get to see these guys play, it's literally going to be the first time we get to see these all 5 members play. We know that Freiberg, he had a little bit of the Rona and wasn't able to play with the squad. Vendetta was ringing in, and he has absolutely no history on HLTV. He's as fresh as they come. I know that Vendetta actually mentioned that they found him in the pug systems in the Norwegian scene. He has a lot of good rumors milling around about him, about how his mechanical skill can actually be able to impress a lot of people. So Dignitas, they're feeling pretty confident about this 5 coming into this series.
Yeah, the one thing I've got to say is this. I don't want to hear after this game that we're going to flip the script of excuses and we've gone from, well, we're more of a LAN team and experienced person, it was online. So then you kick out a bunch of the experienced players, you change your IGL, you bring in these guys who've never played before, and then it's, well, they're young, they've got to learn the game, and they've got to integrate in our team. It's like, listen, if I wanted a team to still be in the tournament doing nothing, giving loads of excuses, we'd have told MIBR to keep their old lineup.
They brought viewership, too.
True. Someone wants to watch them. That's also an angle as well that I feel like people are probably going to miss here is because we're online and there's just no point, you can't police it. We don't use the rules of LAN. It's not like Vendetta can only talk during the timeout. He can talk whenever he wants. So even the angle of, well, Freiberg's the IGL, how will he transition to that? That might not even be much of an issue. Like maybe he just calls the basic thing in the round or something he sees, or he's generally the voice. But Vendetta can be very, very instrumental in what they do in this team.
And I think they are showing signs of that, right? I mean, improvising and adapting as a part of the competition, and Dignitas are making the steps to be relevant in the online space, picking up the 2 young guns, the 2 rifles. And as I mentioned before, this is going to open up a whole new array of opportunities and strategies for Dignitas that they couldn't even fathom before, with the firepower coming out of Get Right, with the firepower coming out of Exist, and not just the firepower, but what they're comfortable with, the types of duels across the map that they're comfortable with. And in this online realm, with the re-aggression, with everyone feeling super confident, you need to have more fresh blood that's willing to get in the mix and get involved in the action, and that's exactly what these 2 young guns are going to be. I'm looking straight at Freiberg, though. Man, last year, I think the identity of Dignitas was sacrifice Freiberg to the gods and see what happens. Let's do a set, execute piece, and wish for the best, right? I think Freiberg needs to be a little bit more selfish coming into this Flashpoint 2 and realize that at the end of the day, his mind is a clear mind, but he's got to put some frags on the board as well.
So you don't think he's just going to be out there self-sacrificing,
I don't
making
think
himself
so. Not
the
anymore.
sacrificial
Not
lamb?
anymore.
He's not under Exist's boot any longer? All right. Well, we're going to talk more about some of these individual players in just a moment when we get back with our pregame as we head into our first match between Mad Lions and Dignitas Vi.
After the break, midsummer action.
As
Dignitas
Face off. It's Mad Lions.
Mad Lions.
See you in 3.
Didn't get caught in editing, did it? Sorry, Mad Lions.